Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We've got a great show for you today. Let's go ahead and open up the phone lines. We can do that. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can call us at any time during the program, and we might take your call. Would love to hear from you, especially during this first 30 minutes if you're in Alabama, because we're going to be doing a legislative update. You can leave us a voicemail at that same number at any time. You can leave us a written note at any time at tvlr.fm/contact. In the second half of the program, we are going to be talking to the president of the Minneapolis Labor Federation about how they are fighting back against ICE, how they are mobilizing with their community to protect their immigrant sisters and brothers. Really excited for that conversation. The first half of the program, we're going to be talking in the first 30 minutes primarily about Alabama. And then we're going to be talking to somebody from Good Jobs First, a nonprofit organization, about some research that they have done on worker enforcement, on enforcement of federal worker protection laws, which have been in free fall under the second Trump administration. Really excited for that conversation. Let's jump into the Alabama stuff. We have got a couple of cool bills, some good bills that would be good if they passed. They probably won't, but they're good, and you should know about it so that you can ask your state representative why they don't support it. They have been introduced in the state house by State Representative Neil Rafferty. Adam, can you talk to us about those bills that he has filed?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So State Representative Neil Rafferty is a Democrat. He represents House District 54 in Birmingham, and he filed two bills this week that are worth knowing about. I'll start with the first one, the clawback bill, and you've probably heard us talk about that for the last couple of years. This is legislation that would allow the state of Alabama to claw back tax incentives from companies that violate child labor or human trafficking laws. We all know we've had some really disturbing cases of illegal child labor, busted here in the state of Alabama. And considering the near total lack of any strings attached with these big incentive deals, even this, relatively mild legislation is a really big step in the right direction. So Representative Rafferty has brought this clawback bill back this year, and it is HB 346. Under existing law, an entity is not disqualified from receiving tax incentives under the Alabama Jobs Act if it violates human trafficking or child labor laws. This bill would prevent entities who violate human trafficking or child labor laws from receiving economic tax incentives under the Alabama Jobs Act. This bill would require an entity that engages in any act or practice that violates these laws to reimburse the state and local government the cost of any economic development tax incentives received by the corporation or legal entity. And so that's going to be going to the House Committee on State Government. That committee is led by Chris Sells, and the vice chair is Russell Bedsole. Barbara Boyd is the ranking minority member, and it also features Mac Butler, Prince Chestnut, Jamie Keel, Mike Kirkland, Marilyn Lands, Kelvin Lawrence, Marcus Paramore, Mike Shaw, Scott Stadhagen, Randy Wood, and Ernie Yarbrough. And the other bill from Rafferty for your radar is also going to this same state government committee in the House, and this is HB 352. This bill would require any company receiving an economic tax incentive under the Alabama Jobs Act to certify that the company does not require overtime, does not practice shift rotation, does not require weekend work, provides emergency leave, guarantees a full work week, does not require off-the-clock work, and does not count the time an employee spends transitioning to or from a bathroom or break room to count toward the employee's allotted break time. So, really big bill there. Again, that's House Bill 352. The clawback bill, that is House Bill 346. So both of those from Neil Rafferty. And there's a few other things that we're tracking for sure. The weather kind of slowed them down a little bit, but there's still a lot of stuff happening in Montgomery that's hostile to working people. There's really some doubling down on a broken criminal justice system. There are attacks on the safety net. There's targeting of our immigrant brothers and sisters. And of course, as to be expected, there's some tax breaks for industry being proposed. I noticed multiple bills providing tax breaks for the poultry industry, for example. Though in fairness, my state representative, Danny Crawford in Limestone County, said it's to help farmers, not corporations. Whatever you want to make of that. There is a bill, House Bill 185, which is sponsored by Republican Representative Brock Colvin from House District 26 over in the Albertville area. And by the way, Jacob, Brock Colvin was born in 1995. So he's a youngster. He's one of the young Republicans in there. HB 185 would exempt certain general aviation aircraft and any machinery or equipment installed on these aircraft from ad valorem taxes. This is money that would go for education. And this has a fiscal note anticipating over $11 million cost for this tax break. Just for reference, it would only cost about $14 million to provide no-cost school breakfast to every single public school child in this state. For the purposes of this act, the term general aviation aircraft means an aircraft that meets all of the following. It's used in civil aviation. It's not a commercial or military or unmanned aerial vehicle or drone. It's owned or leased by a company whose principal place of business is in the state of Alabama. So I'm not sure exactly who is going to benefit from this. Companies that are doing business in Alabama, if they have a private helicopter or private jet or airplane, I guess they'll get a pretty sweet tax break out of that if it passes. Call me crazy, but I'd prefer to feed hungry children before we do something like that. But, maybe I'm the crazy one. We are going to talk a little bit more later in the show about a really weird and troubling environmental bill. We have the Alabama Rivers Alliance coming on here in a minute. But again, there were some really positive bills filed this week by Representative Neil Rafferty out of Birmingham, the clawback bill, HB 346, as well as the HB 352, which is regarding scheduling fairness, and really a pretty robust way to put some strings attached to tax incentives to make sure that these companies that receive these incentives are doing right by the workers who generate all these profits. And the last one I wanted to mention is from State Senator Robert Stewart. He is a Democrat from Selma. He has filed Senate Bill 171 alongside several Democratic co-sponsors in the Senate. And this bill would establish a state minimum wage, which, by the way, we currently don't have one. It would set the minimum at $10 an hour starting January 2027, with exemptions for businesses with 50 or less employees. Now, I can't help but note that we were fighting for $10.10 an hour in Birmingham, Huntsville, and cities across the state during the Raise the Wage campaigns. Oh gosh, like nearly 15 years ago at this point. But, whatever you make of the specific language in this bill and the dollar amount, I will say that I'm very glad to see raising the minimum wage getting back into the conversation at least. Like I said, Alabama relies on the federal minimum wage, which since 2009 has been $7.25. And for tipped employees, it's a whopping $2.13 an hour. It's been nearly 17 years since it was raised nationally. And while a lot of states and cities across the country have steadily raised their minimum wages, the only action we've seen on this front in Alabama was when the state legislature preempted cities from raising it in retaliation to Birmingham doing such a thing. So my final reminder here on our legislative update is to be sure to stay in touch with your representative and your senator. Let them know how you feel about what's going on down there, and let them know you're paying attention, because they hear from a lot of special interests, a lot of very powerful entities with a lot of powerful lobbyists. And it's important that they hear from everyday working people as well. Yeah, and there are a lot of good advocacy groups hosting a lot of advocacy days coming up in the coming weeks and months. So, please consider taking advantage of one of those opportunities to go down to the State House yourself and help show some people power down there. But even if you can't do that, and not all of us can, be sure to do what you can by staying in touch with your lawmakers and also spreading the word. Share with your networks, educate your friends, your neighbors, and coworkers. The vast majority of people have no idea what's really going on down in the legislative session, even though these bills, these laws that are passed, absolutely impact our lives, our economy, our community, our safety. So it's really, really important to stay informed, keep your neighbors and your coworkers engaged and informed, and make sure you're letting these lawmakers know how you feel about what's going on down there.
It was interesting to me that you, in your description of the Child Labor Clawback Bill, you said that Rafferty's bill would it would revoke incentives for companies that violate child labor laws. Is that actually the language of the bill? Because I know that last year, the bill that was filed by Marika Coleman would have allowed the Department of Revenue to revoke tax incentives from companies that violate child labor law rather than mandating it. So is Rafferty's bill a little bit stronger on that point this year, or?
It seems to be, from the way I've read the language, yes.
I wonder if as far as the policy, that sounds better to me, right? I mean, if we're going to be giving $300 million to a company, then they should be on their best behavior, and they should not be employing 12-year-olds on, in manufacturing environments. But I wonder if that signals a lack of confidence from the Democratic caucus in being able to push it through, because the legislation last year from Marika Coleman that would have just allowed the Department of Revenue to exercise that right, that actually passed the Senate unanimously. And so, I don't know. I know that we're going to be trying to get Neil Rafferty on the program sometime soon, so I'm going to be interested in seeing, what his thoughts are on why kind of including that as an automatic thing rather than allowing the Department of Revenue to do that. I'm interested in his thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But and his other bill, the Democrats have been over the last few years really trying to tack on benefits for working people to tax incentives, because the Republicans have been trying to tack on detriments for working people to tax incentives, saying that, if the state of Alabama gives you tax incentives, then you can't voluntarily recognize your workers' union, things like that. So I think, it's certainly fair play. And look, if we're going to be using tax incentives to encourage policy, then we should be using it to encourage good things as well as bad things. We should also, not be encouraging bad things, but if we're going to do one, we should definitely do the other. And if we're going to be giving $300 million, the bare minimum is you don't exploit and abuse Alabama's children, but then you should also treat our adult workers well. You should allow them to watch an Alabama game on a Saturday if they want. You should allow them to work 40 hours a week and then go home and not have to work more than that. You should allow them. If they don't want to, right? And that's not, the bill doesn't say that you can't offer overtime, but you should not be a company getting hundreds of millions of dollars from the state of Alabama and then saying as a condition of employment, you have to sacrifice your life to this international multi-billion-dollar corporation. 60, 70-hour weeks. You just shouldn't be able to do that. You should not be able to do that. I think we've got our guest on the line. Our guest is Charles Miller. He is the policy director for the Alabama Rivers Alliance. Charles, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks, Jacob.
Really excited to be talking to you. You've been tracking some legislation that would affect the environment in Alabama. Can you talk to us about the piece of legislation and what it would do?
Yeah, so there's this piece of legislation. It's Senate Bill 71, House Bill is 162, and it does a few things. One is it prevents any state agency. So we're not just talking ADEM or the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, but we're also talking about the Department of Health. We're talking about even the what they call the Workforce Department now, the Department of Labor, from setting any environmental standards that are stricter numerically or in scope than federal law, unless you can prove some things based on certain types of science. And the proponents of this bill have been presenting it as if it is a sound science piece of legislation. They've been talking about it in conjunction with a bill that passed in Tennessee last year. That was Senate Bill 880 in Tennessee, as well as the executive order on gold standard science that came out of the new Trump administration. But the big issue for me is that it excludes all science that doesn't show a direct causal link to manifest bodily harm. And that's the exact language in the bill. And what that means is that excludes basically all science that proves how toxic chemicals affect the human body. When you develop a chronic disease, when you develop lung cancer from smoking, you can't say, well, it was that cigarette that did it. And that's what this bill would essentially require. And so, I think it ties our state's hands in not being able to go above these federal minimums for environmental protections, and for protections from toxic chemicals, which is never the way that the federal laws that enable these things are intended to work. And then it also presents this impossible standard to reach to prove something is actually harmful enough to regulate. So, it's kind of like two bills mashed together. And I don't think really, I always have this idea of like, you've got bills that are good, bad, and ugly. And a bad bill you can fix, but an ugly bill is just, there's no way to fix it. And I think, unfortunately, this is probably an ugly bill in my book.
And, something I wanted to ask was that it's not just environmental groups such as Alabama Rivers Alliance who are coming out in opposition to this, right? Like there are other concerns and other folks who do have concerns. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, there's been a Senate hearing on this bill, and it passed out of committee there on not only a party line vote, only Republicans voted against it, and Republicans and Democrats voted, only Republicans voted for it, and Republicans and Democrats voted against it. But, like I mentioned, there is this kind of like states' rights angle. The idea is that our state is kind of the front line when it comes to regulating environmental harms. And I think that makes sense because, you think about Alabama versus a state out west, we've got different environmental issues. We've got different environmental issues than, Virginia or Maryland or Washington State or California. And so there's going to be things that need to be regulated here that don't maybe need to be regulated in Washington State. And so to kind of just cede that power strikes me as really odd. And there, I think, has been some interest from some even like conservative groups in Montgomery to kind of say like, hey guys, this doesn't seem very like pro state sovereignty. This doesn't seem very like pro, limited government. So, again, it's like Jacob was saying, there's a lot of special interest down there in Montgomery, and this seems to be a creature of some of those special interests.
Charles, I've got a question really quick on just the impetus for this legislation, right? Because what it would limit the ability of legislators to act, but what is the indication from these lobbyists that legislators in Alabama are interested in acting at all? Right? I mean, who are the? I mean, what is even the problem that is seeking to be solved here?
There's this piece that's kind of a little bit of inside baseball that I haven't mentioned because it's related to a database that I didn't even know about before last year. ADEM depends on this database called IRIS that's from the EPA to set certain numbers related to cancer risk in some of their regulations. And last year, Alabama Rivers Alliance, along with most of the water keepers in the state, and I think at least one other group, petitioned the Environmental Management Commission that runs ADEM to update their standards based on their own rules, which require them to use this database. And the that database is singled out in this legislation as something that ADEM should not depend on. So, I don't have any proof to say that that was the trigger for this, but if it's something I hadn't heard about until last year, I really doubt that this was a hot button issue nationally, that the legislators were all, ready to go this session to ban the use of IRIS, as they call it. So, that seems to me to be some of the driving force. I think also, legislation in Tennessee passed that is similar, but doesn't go quite as far. And, a lot of times if you're a lobbyist and you see something happen in another state that you like, you might try to push your advantage a little bit, So I think it's kind of a combination of those two. We got a good win, environmental groups did last year, and some folks don't like when we make water cleaner for Alabamians. Go figure.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It reeks of retaliation, which is so frustrating, right? To even make very modest gains. Just, hey, you should do what you're supposed to do. And that's like a bridge too far. Now we have to sacrifice states' rights in a state that, glorifies states' rights. It's very baffling. And so you mentioned it did pass out of Senate committee. So where do things stand right now in both chambers? Kind of where is the bill and what are some of the next steps?
So, it could be on the Senate floor this coming week. I kind of anticipate that it might be. So, this weekend, Monday is a good time to reach out to your senators and say, hey, just so you know, this bill would kind of blow up our entire regulatory system, gives all the power to Washington, and doesn't allow us to look at risk of things like cancer. But we think it's probably going to be on the Senate floor either this week or next. But after that, it has to go back to the House, and we'll see. I think the Senate sponsor's been pretty dead set on getting this through real quick. And I don't know how the House sponsor feels about that, so we'll see. I mean, the number one thing, like you guys mentioned earlier, is contact your legislators. And it's great if you can email them from your personal email, or if you can call them, but you can also go on our website, alabamarivers.org. We've got an action alert set up, so it'll send straight to your legislators from your with your address and all that. But just keep calling them. That's how we, as the environmental movement, I'm sure just like the labor movement, have often gotten our victories in stopping bad things in Alabama, is just regular everyday folks stepping up and telling their legislators, hey, this is a really bad idea.
That's right. Every single year, we the people are able to stop some bad bills. We're able to make some bad bills a little less bad, and we're able to squeak through some good bills, even in a really tough environment like Alabama, where there are such powerful special interests, and where many of the lawmakers are seemingly more beholden to those special interests than they are their constituents. But it's so true when everyday people get involved, when they make those calls and emails and make those personal visits when possible. It really does make an impact. Lawmakers need to hear from regular people that we're paying attention, that we smell something rotten here, and it's not for us. Whoever it's for, it's not for regular folks. So, Charles, was there anything else you wanted to share with us before we let you go this morning?
No, I think that's it. Just call your legislators, tell them this is a bad bill, and as more good or bad things crop up in the legislature, if you're interested in following environmental issues, go to our website, alabamarivers.org, follow us on social media, and we'll keep you up to date.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charles. And real quick, who is the sponsor of this bill?
Senate sponsor is Donnie Chasteen. He's down in the Wiregrass. And then the House sponsor is Troy Stubbs, who represents areas of Wetumpka. So both these guys from kind of closer to Montgomery. but yeah, those are the two guys. I've spoken with Chasteen. I haven't spoken with Stubbs, but they're both, you know, to me, like you said, it seems like this was something that was brought to them, not something they came up with on their own. So
Right, right. Well, Charles, I really appreciate it. I appreciate all your efforts, and appreciate you being willing to come on the show today and talk to us a little bit about it.
absolutely, thanks for having me on.
Charles Miller is the policy director for the Alabama Rivers Alliance. We appreciate his time. Look forward to talking to him again. I'm sure we will. We have a Kmart Radio DJ says, good morning, TVLR crew, in the Twitch chat. 8-Bits TV says, Union Strong. Benjo says, good morning. Mentioned the minimum wage. Stussy in the chat said that Georgia's minimum wage is $5.15 an hour, so overridden by the federal minimum wage. The Union Gus says, I help folks with job searches for work. The Portland Metro minimum wage is $16.60 an hour, but it's still starvation wages. Last looked at the MIT living wage calculator was almost 2 times that. Somebody in the chat says, does Alabama have a supermajority in the legislature? Yes, Republicans do have a supermajority in the legislature. Stucci mentions that IATSE has $18 an hour contracts. Presumably that's in Georgia, and I'm actually surprised that it's that low, to be honest, because IATSE's minimum wage in contracts in Huntsville is 22 or 25. Is it now 25?
I believe it's 25, and
Wow.
Chattanooga, I think, was 22.
Yeah. So, Stussy, I'm actually kind of shocked that Georgia's IATSE contracts are that low, to be frank. I wonder if maybe your contracts include benefits. That would be a possibility, because Local 900s is just straight pay. They don't have benefits or retirement or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always, devils in the details, for sure.
Union Gus says, it's also wild to hear about folks who don't believe in vaccines and will stare at the sun without glasses during eclipse lecture us about the importance of science-backed policy.
Oh, really? Yeah. So they're pro-limited government, pro-states' rights,
Right.
except they're not. And they want a science-backed bill while trying to fight science. And, I just wanted to mention real quick on, why cover this? Well, working class people are disproportionately impacted by what happens with our environment, right? We are directly impacted. We know it's working class neighborhoods, especially black and brown, poor communities that bear the brunt of pollution. We know workers are on the front line of environmental destruction, whether it's being exposed to toxic chemicals at work, like we report on all the time, every week on Boss Watch, are dying from dangerous heat outdoors, or, of course, the workers who go out and respond to the natural disasters. We've had a lot of workers out in the elements over the last couple of weeks, helping to keep our lights on, right, and keep our heat on. We know that, the bosses and the billionaires can kind of insulate themselves a little bit from climate change, but us working folks don't have that luxury. So, that's why I thought it was important to touch on this issue. And it really is disturbing to think that there are some lawmakers in Montgomery who want to give up their right to protect our environment and our communities. That is just very interesting.
On the pollution question, Kmart Radio DJ on Twitch chat says, it just asked the black neighborhoods in Anniston, Monsanto, and the Army Depot.
Oh, yes. Amen.
And Pixley for Congress says Oklahomans will vote on a $15 an hour minimum wage this year, but we expect strong pressure against. That's really exciting. And Union Gus says IATSE needs to start pattern bargaining. Yeah, you should. I don't know why I guess, because it is so different, right? Like you're negotiating with each venue locally. It's all different contractors. But I mean, you do that. You see pattern bargaining like that with with SAG-AFTRA and stuff.
I think there's always opportunities for more collaboration and coordination to make us stronger. I think absolutely.
Stussy does say that's not a Georgia contract. It's for low-budget movies and TV shows. Think of Lifetime Hallmark movies. On the bigger shows, our lowest is $45 an hour and highest is $141 an hour. Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we're going to take a break here momentarily. We're going to be right back, and we will be talking to Siobhan Standard, a research analyst from Good Jobs First, about the free fall of the enforcement of worker protection laws by the federal government. Really excited for that conversation. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit nalc.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. Our phones are open. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We just wrapped up talking to the policy director for Alabama Rivers Alliance and talked about some other Alabama legislative updates. If you missed that, you can find the stream on Facebook and YouTube at the Valley Labor Report and watch that. We are about to be talking to Siobhan Standert about the free fall of enforcement of worker protection laws by the federal government. All that and more on today's program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we are up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then you should think about getting your local, regional council, or international to sponsor the show. We couldn't do it without our union sponsors, so you can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey, good morning, y'all. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. And we want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, WMSP, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. And we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out at laborradionetwork.org. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard union brothers who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping to make a difference on that front. We can't do it without you, so we want to thank you for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener, appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from January 23rd to the 30th. All across the South, 56 workers in 6 bargaining units have gone public with their union campaigns. 223 workers in 3 bargaining units are trying to decertify their union. 763 workers across 11 bargaining units unionized. 19 workers in 1 bargaining unit voted against unionization, and 170 workers in 2 bargaining units withdrew their petitions for a union election. Here are the details. In new union campaigns, 13 workers at Republic National Distributing Company in Lubbock, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 577. 15 workers at Starbucks in Prospect, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 12 workers at the Fort Worth Report in Fort Worth, Texas, demonstrated support for unionization with the News Guild, CWA Local 39521. Workers likely pushed by their employer and helped by the National Right to Work Foundation filed a petition to decertify the Communication Workers of America, CWA, Locals 3683 and 3716 as the union representing 119 workers at Windstream Carolina, LLC in Rural Hall, North Carolina. Workers also likely pushed by their employer and with help from the anti-union National Right to Work Foundation filed a petition to decertify the International Chemical Workers Union Council, ICWUC/UFCW, as the union representing 51 workers at Parker O-Ring and Engineered Seals in Lynchburg, Virginia. In election results, 280 workers at Gold Strike Casino in Tunica, Mississippi voted in a card check election to unionize with the Teamsters Local 667. 126 workers at the Pew Research Center in Washington, D.C. voted 74 to 45 in favor of unionization with the Nonprofit Professional Employees Union, NPEU IFPTE Local 70. 44 workers at PepsiCo in Atlanta, Georgia voted 30 to 12 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 528. 59 workers at PepsiCo in Lithonia, Georgia voted 43 to 9 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 528. 8 workers at Build-A-Bear Workshop in St. Louis, Missouri voted 8 to 0 in favor of unionization with the United Food and Commercial Workers UFCW Local 655. 8 workers at Mission Conversion Services Alliance in Keville, Kentucky withdrew their petition for a union election with the United Steelworkers USW. 19 workers at Momentive Performance Materials in Friendly, West Virginia voted 9 to 10 against unionization with the ICWUC Local 698C. 70 workers at Super Asphalt Pavement Corporation in San Juan, Puerto Rico voted in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 901. And 7 workers at the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum in Matewan, West Virginia voted in a card check election to unionize with the United Mine Workers of America, UMWA, Local 1440. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, the ACLU is fighting against free speech. That's what Matt Brunig argues in his new piece analyzing the organization's appeal of an administrative law judge decision. The case stems back to a decision to fire a worker who had criticized the way that managers treated their employees, ostensibly because this worker, who is not white, was being racist. This despite the fact that the criticisms in question contained no racial content. The ACLU has employed a scorched earth legal strategy to attempt to avoid reinstatement and back pay, but lost in front of both a private arbitrator and the administrative law judge for the National Labor Relations Board. Now they are trying to overturn precedent at the Labor Relations Board that allows workers to more freely criticize working conditions so that they can retroactively say that firing this employee for criticizing her working conditions was justified. Let them work. Or no, let them telework. That's what a private arbitrator told the Department of Health and Human Services, saying that they violated federal law when the department terminated the collective bargaining agreement that they had with their union and forced them to come back to the office. Representatives of the department said they had to because of Trump's executive order, but the arbitrator pointed out that federal law makes it illegal to, quote, enforce any rule or regulation which is in conflict with any applicable collective bargaining agreement if the agreement was in place before the rule or regulation was prescribed. HHS has 30 days to appeal the ruling of the arbitrator, which they will almost certainly do. In strikes and bargaining updates, the oil workers rejected the latest offer from the oil refineries. Their bargaining committee rejected it unanimously. The union, the United Steelworkers, USW, represents 30,000 oil refinery workers, and the contract expires on February 1st with no indication that there will be a deal reached before then. The union is aiming to get language, quote, barring AI from displacing, monitoring, or automatically disciplining workers. Barring AI from disciplining, monitoring, or barring AI from displacing, monitoring, or automatically disciplining members, according to labor notes, along with traditional asks like wage increases. Texas hospitality workers have won a $20 an hour minimum wage, at least at the Hyatt Grand Regency Hotel in San Antonio, Texas. The workers, organized with Unite Here Local 23, ratified a contract containing that higher minimum wage unanimously. The contract also includes reduced health care costs, more paid time off, and reduced workloads. Mary Saucedo, a housekeeper at the Grand Hyatt for 16 years, expressed relief and optimism about the new contract in an interview with Fox San Antonio, saying, quote, with the wage increases, I'll be able to actually save and not have to worry so much every month about all of my expenses. Amazon Teamsters in Kentucky are already making their workplace better, saying that immediately after they announced their unionization, management began negotiating with them, repairing dilapidated equipment, and more. In political and legislative updates, conservatives lied about telework in the government. That's the conclusion you have to come to by reading a new Government Accountability Office report, GAO, on the practice in the Department of Defense. In the report, the organization says that the Department of Defense hasn't really had effective formal evaluations of telework and remote work programs, and even that whether or not an employee was teleworking wasn't effectively tracked, citing inconsistent government reports about the number of people teleworking and how in some cases the data that was only the number of people eligible for telework or remote work, not the people who were actually taking advantage of those programs, were the numbers reported. Nevertheless, they did cite data and testimonials from management in select components of the DoD, with officials from all components interviewed, saying that telework and remote work, quote, maintained and in some cases improved mission productivity and efficiency. Previous GAO reports on telework have also found positive effects from more general studies about telework in other industries. This in stark contrast to Republicans and conservatives saying that telework has degraded mission efficiency and productivity in the government. Boeing has killed again. That's where it looks like the investigation into last year's Louisville, Kentucky crash by the National Transportation Safety Board is headed. In November, a UPS cargo flight crashed shortly after takeoff and killed the 3 on board along with 12 on the ground. The preliminary report has recently come out, and while the NTSB isn't officially citing a cause yet, they are pointing towards structural flaws in the plane that Boeing knew about as potential reasons. Boeing, once known for quality, has shifted its priorities much more towards profit in recent decades, taking cues from GE's Jack Welch. In 2018 and 2019, problems with Boeing aircraft killed hundreds of people. In 2024, the emergency door of a plane flew off mid-flight, injuring several passengers, and whistleblowers have tried to shed light on systemic problems in safety and quality control in the company, and unions have tried to temper the company's lust for profits in contract negotiations, but it seems so far that nothing has worked. More people live in states with a $15 an hour minimum wage than live in a state with only the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour for the first time ever. This after 19 states raised their minimum wages in January, giving 8.3 million workers across the country a raise, putting $83 million more in the hands of workers. Unfortunately, basically none of those workers are in the South. Virginia is the only southern state that raised its minimum wage this year, and I know that some people say that's a dubious characterization of the state. If we missed anything, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and you can subscribe to our newsletter at tvlr.fm to get the exhaustive version of Last Week in Southern Labor, which you should do because we had to leave out probably about half of the stories that are going to be included in the newsletter. So subscribe at tvlr.fm. Our next guest is Siobhan Standard. She is a research analyst at Good Jobs First. Siobhan, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. You recently authored a report for Good Jobs First about the federal enforcement of worker protection laws under the second Trump administration. Can you give us the top lines from the report?
Yeah, so this new study looked at both wage and hour and workplace safety enforcement under the second Trump administration. Because we began this data analysis only 2/3 of the way through the first year of the second Trump administration and had pretty limited data from 2025, we decided to look at the data in 2 different ways. So first, we looked at penalties issued between January 1st and the end of September for all years between 2009 and 2025. So we found that for both wage and hour division violations and OSHA, penalties issued for wage and workplace safety violations dropped 66% in inflation-adjusted dollars in 2025. The enforcement drop at the wage and hour division was by far the most dramatic, with a 97% reduction in wage theft cases completed by the agency. Second, we looked at the average monthly penalties by presidential term from Obama to Trump's second term, which showed very similar numbers. So penalties for wage violations under the wage and hour division dropped 94%, and then workplace health and safety penalties by OSHA dropped 45%. And this includes Trump's first term, which remained in line with track records for both Obama and Biden at these two agencies. So this points to a pretty drastic shift in the regulatory priorities with the second Trump administration.
When I saw that in the report, the fact that enforcement had been relatively steady from Obama to Biden, that means that even Trump's first term was basically the same. And Trump's first term and Obama's presidency being relatively similar didn't surprise me. But I was actually surprised that there, if you look at the graphs of enforcement cases and in penalties, there's really not a marked increase in Biden's during Biden's administration, and that really kind of surprised me. Were you surprised when you saw how consistent federal enforcement of worker protection laws like safety and wage and hour protections have been for the last almost 20 years?
Yeah, I definitely was. I mean, we think about that on partisan lines a lot, right? And so you would assume, given the rhetoric during their presidencies, that Biden or Obama a little bit, but mostly Biden would have higher labor violations and penalties issued and whatnot. So yeah, I was a little shocked. But it's good to see, that our regulatory agencies can be this consistent despite the partisan issues.
Right, at least until the first, or at least until the second Trump administration, which is
until this year.
Yeah, which is what your report was about. And so, when people think about wage theft, they hear theft, and so I think that a lot of people hear that term and they think that bosses are somehow getting access to employees' checking accounts and just stealing money from it. That's not exactly how it works. Can you talk about what wage theft is and how it typically works?
Yeah, so wage theft generally is just where employers fail to pay their workers the full wages that they have earned. They're definitely not, taking money out of their bank account that's already in there. But this can include obvious cases like the withholding of wages or tips or not paying the legally mandated minimum wage. It can also be a little bit more subtle, right? So it can be things like requiring your employee to work through their lunch breaks, or a big one is even misclassifying your employers as independent contractors so that the employer can avoid paying benefits and overtime.
And then the next question for people that I find when I talk about this problem is that, Jake, is this really that big of a problem? Is there really just a raft of employers not paying workers what they're due?
Yeah, kind of. Estimates from the Economic Policy Institute state that about $15 billion is stolen from workers due to wage violations each year. And the AFL-CIO recently reported in its 2025 Death on the Job report that nearly 3.2 million work-related injuries and illnesses are reported annually. If we look at the regulatory or enforcement numbers, the enforcement of wage theft and safety violation has on average resulted in $1 billion a year in recovered wages and penalties. And this, of course, includes federal along with state and local enforcement. So this, corporate abuse of workers is widespread, both in terms of the number of workers that it impacts, as well as the financial implications.
And the wage theft in particular, because it is so sort of, under the table might not exactly be the right way to describe it, but it is a less visible form of theft. If you just don't get the money in your bank account, then maybe, you in a lot of cases, you would have to actually analyze your pay stub or know when you worked over 40 hours in a week, or, know how many tips you got to know if your tips were withheld, or know the Davis-Bacon regulations, if you're on a federal work site. And a lot of people don't know that, and so it's really easy for workers to not know that they are being stolen from, and so it's really easy for bosses to get away with that. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Death on the Job report, because I just really don't think people realize how many people die on the job. I mean, like, violently and in really gruesome ways, but also who get occupational diseases. It's like thousands and thousands of people every year die from, in most cases, preventable diseases that they get from their job. And so enforcement of laws like the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, which, has minimum wage, like Davis-Bacon, like overtime laws, and enforcement of worker protection laws like, OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Act, the Mine Safety and Health Act. All of those are really, really important things to the extent possible, kind of bring employers to heel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much. I mean, we rely on our regulatory laws all the time to keep these employers in check. And so,
I mentioned when we were talking on the phone yesterday that we have a segment that we call Boss Watch, where we have, for the last few years, just relied on press releases from OSHA, from the EEOC, from the Wage and Hour Division, from MSHA, to highlight how bosses in the South are breaking the law and stealing from their workers, or discriminating against workers, or putting their workers in harm's way, and in some cases killing workers. And we've got a press release from OSHA this week about a contractor in Birmingham exposing workers to trench collapse hazards, which is one of the most common and preventable ways that people die on the job is a trench falling in on them. And actually, a worker in Huntsville only 6 weeks ago died because of a trench collapse. But we have noticed over the last year a marked decrease in the number of enforcement cases, at least that are getting press releases from these enforcement agencies. Did y'all notice that too? And is that the impetus for this research, or was there something else maybe that kind of went under the radar that prompted y'all to want to take a look into the numbers?
Yeah, no, you pretty much nailed it. So most of my work revolves around maintaining a database called Violation Tracker. So the database collects monetary penalties and settlements or fines that are issued against companies. So in order to do this, we do, look through all of the press releases at all the federal regulatory agencies. We also look at their compliance data sets. And we update this monthly. So I'm looking at these agencies quite frequently. And so in early 2025, I did begin to notice that the Department of Labor specifically was failing to update its press releases and compliance data sets at the normal rate. For the first few months of the year last year, we collected no penalties at all for noncompliance, where previously we were averaging between 20 and 30 cases a month during our data collection. So this really stuck out as abnormal. While we expect there to be some delays, in either enforcement or disclosure violations during a change in administration, this was much more drastic than we were expecting. So we kept an eye on it for the next few months, noticed some slight improvements, but it was still significantly lower than what we had seen in 2024 and years prior. So that's when we decided in midsummer really to quantify it to get this information public.
And we really appreciate you doing that. The report is titled Worker Protections in Free Fall, the Collapse of Federal Labor Enforcement Under the Second Trump Administration. Interestingly, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 1 week, not long after your report came out, the Department of Labor issued a press release ostensibly, or not ostensibly, directly claiming to have recovered the most back wages in history in calendar year 2025, really pretty directly contradicting the findings of your report. And it's really difficult for me because you mentioned that you're pulling this from the agency's own data. And so have you been able, and I know that you've been looking into this press release and trying to get information on where the Department of Labor is getting the numbers from. And so what have you been able to find out in the couple of weeks since they issued that statement?
Yeah, so the short answer is not a whole lot. But to put this into context, in early January, the Wage and Hour Division issued a press release claiming to have recovered over $259 million in back wages from nearly 17,000 cases in fiscal year 2025. So in order to verify that, I looked at the agency's own enforcement data set, which was last updated on January 16th. So theoretically, this should be fully complete and include all of the cases, at least from fiscal year 2025. And its own data shows that only $62 million was paid back to workers during fiscal year 2025 from just over 5,000 cases. So that's a discrepancy of nearly $200 million and 12,000 cases. Between the years of 2010 and 2024, there was an average of $230 million in back wages returned to workers. So if that claim is accurate, it actually is in line with what we would expect from the wage and hour division. But the numbers are just simply not backed up by any publicly available data right now. So once I saw this, I did submit a Freedom of Information Act request to the agency asking for the information to verify this claim. And I have yet to hear back from them. So that's about as far as I am. I think they have one more week by law to respond to my FOIA request. So we'll see if there's any updates in the coming weeks.
Well, yeah, and Siobhan, they always have been following the law, and so I'm sure that they'll give you everything that you've asked for in the next week.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, is there even is it possible that somehow they just forgot to include 12,000 cases in their public data set, and they're going to be getting around to it? I mean, is it common for the agency to lag significantly and only have 30% of the year's cases documented by the end of that year? I mean, is there any precedent for such a large discrepancy, and that this might be resolved, and that maybe, at least the wage and hour stuff would be more in line with what we've seen over the last 15 years or so?
That certainly is always a possibility. We do often see delays in specifically disclosure of these enforcement actions. So that's one thing that we always have to ask ourselves, right? Is it an enforcement issue or is it a disclosure issue? If it were any other administration, I would probably assume that that's the case. However, we really don't see delays of this nature, right? It has been 4 months, 3 months since, they should have disclosed all of this. Usually the delays are maybe a few weeks to a month. But at this point, it should be out there to the public.
Right. You've been tracking other worker protection enforcement, specifically at the EEOC and the OFCCP, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Program or programs or something like that. How has enforcement of anti-discrimination laws, what has that looked like under Trump's second term?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of changes for anti-discrimination laws since Trump got in office. The Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs in particular, which is within the Department of Labor, was effectively shut down at the beginning of 2025. It was ordered to halt its primary enforcement activity of holding government contractors accountable for employment discrimination. For the last few years before this, we were collecting an average of 1 million in penalties from the OFCCP every month, and that drops to zero immediately in 2025. And now the agency is at risk of being dismantled entirely under the 2026 Department of Labor budget proposal, which instead transfers its primary enforcement activities to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And at the same time, the EEOC is potentially losing 10% of its own funding this year and is already overburdened. The EEOC has also changed its regulatory priorities quite a bit, so it stopped enforcement of discrimination based on gender identity completely, and is instead focused on an anti-DEI agenda. And this is, of course, following the executive order that was issued on Trump's first day ending federal DEI programs. So this is especially dangerous for female workers, as well as non-conforming gender identities, of course, because gender discrimination cases accounted for nearly half of all OFCCP cases while it was operational. Rolling the OFCCP into the EEOC while shifting the priorities of the EEOC will obviously disproportionately impact these already vulnerable people. There have also been fewer racial and national origin discrimination cases for people of color in favor of focus on religious discrimination, especially against Christians. And just last month, I'm sure that people saw this, but the chair of the agency went to social media specifically to solicit complaints from white men who may have experienced employment discrimination, kind of blaming DEI programs and an anti-American bias for the apparent underreporting of discrimination against white males, which, as of course we know, is not a protected class nor particularly vulnerable to labor violations.
Yeah. It is, yeah. It's pretty funny. I mean, not funny because it's actually going to hurt people, but laughable in
how
ridiculous it is. Yeah. Have we seen any federal lawmakers react to your reporting or just the general trend of the decline in enforcement of worker protection laws? I would be shocked if we haven't seen some Democrats say something about it, but interested particularly in any Republican reactions.
Oh, yeah, I haven't gotten any responses from Republicans in particular. I had the Minnesota Senate Labor Committee reach out to me to discuss it and really talk about how this might impact Minnesota in particular. But yeah, no responses from Republicans yet.
Minnesota just ahead of the curve on a lot of things. And so presumably that is, there may be an interest in Minnesota and potentially other states in the state government filling in the gap where the federal government is leaving workers more exposed. Is that kind of is that the gist? Is that why you think they reached out to you?
Yeah, and that goes in line with a lot of our policy recommendations at the end. In the absence of any robust federal enforcement, we really do have to rely on the states. So, this person from Minnesota reached out to me to really figure out how many staffers or investigators would have to be added to their labor agency in order to make up for the lapse in federal regulations or enforcement.
Gotcha. Siobhan Standert is a research analyst at Good Jobs First. She is the author of Worker Protections in Free Fall, The Collapse of Federal Labor Enforcement Under the Second Trump Administration. Siobhan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Is there anything else that you would want to leave the audience with before we let you go?
I think we covered a lot of it, but the biggest thing that I can say right now is just that, we really need to continue funding our regulatory and enforcement agencies at the same level that we have been. As I briefly said earlier, we can't really expect the Trump administration to do so, but we kind of, I would just really urge, Democrats in the House and Senate to just really fight for this as hard as they can.
I don't think that I saw this in your report, but it's something that the AFL-CIO's Death on the Job report touches on every year, which is the fact that these enforcement agencies, even before the DOGE cuts and the second Trump administration's assault on anything that protects working people, they were already severely underfunded. I mean, OSHA during Biden's last year had, I think, half the staff that it did under Ronald Reagan, and significantly lower budget, when you account for inflation. The NLRB, a similar story. And so you've got so many more workers, so many more workplaces, and, a real willingness from employers to flout the law and abuse and exploit their workers. And so the idea that we can continue to degrade the protections that workers have, even as those same protections, to the extent they even exist anymore, are cited as reasons that workers don't need unions. I mean, it's just a total assault on anything that protects workers, their freedoms and their safety. So yeah, really important stuff. Siobhan, thank you so much for your time and your work for Good Jobs First.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
We're going to take a break, folks. We will be right back momentarily. Huntsville Dimworker in the chat said that she is headed out to the anti-ICE rally in Huntsville with 5051 now. Just wanted to check in and say love TVLR and thanks for your work. If anybody's listening in Huntsville and you are at that protest, we would love to hear from you. Get a report from the ground, so to speak. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. 844-899-8857. The phones are open, and you can call in. And we appreciate everybody tuning in. Free American says it would be interesting to see OSHA injury/illness reports and penalties in 2015 and 2024. I can try to. Those numbers are in the report. If you want to Google it again, the title of the report is "Worker Protections in Free Fall: The Collapse of Federal Labor Enforcement Under the Second Trump Administration," and I can try to find it for you during the break. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. We will be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can give us a call. Let us know your thoughts. We had a question in the chat. It would be interesting to see OSHA injury and illness reports and penalties in 2015 and 2024. So during the break, we looked at the report, and we found them. In 2015, The total penalties from OSHA was $140 million. In 2024, the last year of Biden's administration, it was $240 million. And in 2025, it was $95 million. Those are all inflation adjusted. The number of cases dropped significantly as well. So those numbers were the number of penalties, or the total amount of penalties, but what about the number of cases? The average monthly number of cases closed by OSHA dropped 36% in Trump's second term compared to all other presidents, from an average from all other presidents of 1,021 cases closed per month to just over 650 cases closed during Trump's second term per month. Really significant decreases, but the wage and hour decreases are even more significant. So if we look at the average wage theft under each president, let's see, go to that part of the report. We can just go by year. In 2015, there were $160 million recovered by the Wage and Hour Division. In 2024, there were $150 million recovered by the Wage and Hour Division. And in 2025, there was only $35 million recovered by the Wage and Hour Division. Significant decline in enforcement. Adam, you said you had a few plugs for us today. What you got?
Yeah, Tuesday, February 10th is the Immigrants' Rights Coalition Advocacy Day in Montgomery. I know there are a lot of organizations involved with that, so you can just do some Googling. You can find that, but that is Tuesday, February 10th. If you're concerned about some of the targeting of our immigrant brothers and sisters out there in the State House, it's a good opportunity to go to the State House, to interact with lawmakers, let them know how you feel. And connect with like-minded people. And I'll mention a couple other advocacy days as well. While I'm on that subject, Alabama Arise Action is holding its advocacy day on Tuesday, February 24th. Be sure to register in advance. And I do believe Alabama Appleseed is holding an event the same day. So lots of opportunities to get involved in Montgomery on the 24th of February. Cover Alabama is holding their Healthcare Advocacy Day on Tuesday, March 10th. And the Alabama AFL-CIO's Legislative Day and Roadkill Barbecue will be on Wednesday, April 1st. And a couple of trainings to mention. February 11th is going to be a class hosted by littlesis.org, and it's called Excel for Organizers. And was really excited to find this workshop. Little Sis has a ton of resources on their website. Again, that's littlesis.org. littlesis.org, and a ton of resources for research. And they have a workshop on February 11th called Excel for Organizers. So if you want to level up your spreadsheet game, as all organizers should want to do, it is a good training opportunity out there. And also Labor Notes has a stewards workshop on February 18th. It's Thinking Like an Organizer. Now, the stewards workshops are designed for stewards or, elected officers, but that's going to be a really great workshop. You can go to labornotes.org/events to find out more.
We've got a relatively small boss watch, or very small boss watch. And we've been talking about this trend for the whole show about how worker protections under the second Trump administration have been in free fall. And that's indicative, week to week in how few stories we have for Boss Watch. But we do have one story. It's in Alabama. A U.S. Department of Labor investigation has found numerous safety hazards at a civil construction employer's work site following a trench collapse in Jefferson County. The department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration investigators found that CB&A construction workers removed and installed drain pipes for Jefferson County under a suspended load without hard hats and at the edge of an excavation that lacked protective constraints. So OSHA cited CB&A construction with a willful violation and proposed $170,000 in penalties. Trench collapses are I believe, if I'm not remembering incorrectly, trench collapses are the number one cause of workplace death in the country, and they are also easily preventable. People know that trench collapses happen. People know how to prevent trench collapses. It is actually not that difficult to prevent a trench collapse, but bosses are lazy. They want to cut corners, and they are willing to put the lives of their workers in danger to be able to save a little bit of money and a little bit of time. And it's shameful, and hopefully these people do have to pay the full amount, and they should have to pay more for putting their workers' lives in danger. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. Adam, you've been looking into some child care news and policy stuff. I don't think that we've got a full deep dive into it, but interested in sort of a preliminary a preliminary relaying of what you've been looking at.
Sure. So, yeah, this is just to kind of preview a discussion we'll have next week where we'll look at childcare a little bit more deeply. But I noticed that AFSCME, which of course is the local government employees union, AFSCME put out a couple pieces over the past week about childcare. And there's also been a lot of news happening around childcare because the Trump administration has been, threatening to freeze low-income child care assistance across the country, but in particular targeting blue states. And so that's something I want to, look into a little bit more because child care seems to be one of those issues that resonates with a lot of people. Obviously, not everyone has children, but everyone who does have children really knows how expensive it can be. And we know how it is really a necessity to be in the workforce. So we've talked about this before on the show plenty of times that in Alabama, our workforce participation rate is pretty low compared to other states. And a lot of the politicians here love to gripe and complain about that. And of course, they want to, imply that it's because there are too many lazy people. There are people who don't want to work, people who are living, high off the hog on government benefits and government assistance, none of which is realistic. But one of the challenges that a lot of parents face is maintaining reliable childcare that you can actually afford and that actually makes it worth it to be in the workforce, right? Because there are plenty of folks who are in situations where after they have paid for their child care and the gas, to get back and forth to the child care, they're barely even coming out ahead, right, on their paycheck. We already talked about earlier in the show that we don't have a minimum wage in Alabama. We follow the federal. So there are a lot of low-wage workers in the state to where childcare is just a huge burden. I know for me personally, when my daughter was in childcare, I was paying, somewhere around $400 a month, and that was for 3 days a week, not even a full 5 days a week. So, in my case, it would have been over $600 a month for that. I know that there are plenty of folks who have even more expensive childcare. Particularly in some of the cities or even some of the rural areas where there's less childcare available. Because that's one of the other issues is can you even find childcare? And can you find childcare that actually works for you and your schedule? We have a lot of workers out here who are working 2 or 3 jobs. A lot of workers who are on second or third shift or rotating shifts. And so finding childcare that can accommodate that is really difficult, and then finding it that you can actually afford. Something that I've seen, there has been some trends among some companies and employers to provide some childcare benefits, whether that's providing, a childcare stipend, or in some cases for really big facilities, providing on-site daycare and on-site childcare. I think that's a good thing. I think childcare is such a huge burden for so many folks. And we want to make sure that our children are safe. We want to make sure that they're taken care of, that it's a good environment for them, right? So it's not something where, you want to just, do bargain shopping necessarily, right? Like if it's the cheapest childcare available, you might be wondering like, well, why is it the cheapest? And so there's a lot of issues there. And the other thing I haven't discussed yet, which I want to get into next week, is childcare workers. There are so many workers in childcare who are making terrible wages, very little benefits in many cases. And there's a real opportunity to unionize and to have worker cooperatives in the childcare industry. And we've seen some exciting things happening out of California on that front. And so, yeah, next week, really want to dive into childcare a little bit more, review some of the stuff that ASME has put out, as well as some of the latest regarding the Trump administration and some of the, federal grants that are being frozen, maybe are going to be frozen. We'll see what's happening there. But yeah, last thing I'll say is for those of you who are listening who have had some experiences with childcare, either as a childcare worker or as a customer, we'd love to hear your feedback and your input. What are some of the issues that you've encountered? How much was it costing you, or does it cost you? And what kind of, barrier can it be at times? So those are some of the issues to explore. And I think, as we pursue union contracts in more and more workplaces, as we pursue community benefits agreements in more and more places, securing childcare is a really important benefit to be fighting for.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into that. But childcare, I mean, it's a huge issue, and that's one of the reasons that that Zohran Mamdani won the mayor's race in New York City. And actually we've got a fellow from Oklahoma in the chat, Zach Flash says solidarity and love from Oklahoma. Doesn't Oklahoma have free childcare for everybody? Haven't I read that somewhere?
I think you're thinking of New Mexico.
Is that New Mexico? I thought it was somewhere else. I'm not sure. But we do have a caller on the line. Let's get this one with the last four digits, 3363, because we've got a couple of callers. So I believe I know who this is. I believe this is Joe from Decatur. Joe from Decatur, how you doing?
I'm good. This is Dana, though. It's not Joe. He's not feeling well.
Oh, Dana, good to hear from you. Sorry, Joe's not feeling well. I hate to hear that. What's on your mind?
He is concerned about the chat bar on Facebook. He can't comment or do anything with it. Is there something I'm doing wrong or something that's going on?
I'm not sure. Some other people have been able to chat. We've got chats from Antonia, from Pierre, and CK. So it's probably something on your end is going to be my guess.
Is that on Facebook?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will check it and see what I can do and see if he can get his chat bar back.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks, Joe and Dana, for tuning in, and always appreciate y'all.
Sending our best to Joe. We love and appreciate him very, very much. And, thanks for calling.
Let's get our next caller. Go ahead and get them on the line. Also from a 256 area code. Believe I know who this is. Believe this is Dwayne. Dwayne, thanks for giving us a call. What's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to be kind of positive about this, that with the legislature being in session and a lot of them having election, there is a program, guys, in Maine that you can look up that started by Randall Liberty. Randall Liberty was a person that as a child went to visit his father, who was incarcerated in Maine. He later became a warden, and now he's the commissioner of Maine's prisons. And what he did that is remarkable is they've reduced their recidivism by 23% and had a whole lot of positive results. And this is initial money was given out by Norris Buffett, Warren there.
Dwayne, you're really breaking up. I'm not sure what your what the problem is, but you were trying to tell us about a program that was going on in Maine.
In Maine. Yes, if you'd look it up, guys, and just call your representatives about it. It's Randall Liberty in Maine with the Department of Corrections there, okay? If you could,
what's the name of the program?
It's Liberty, Randall Liberty. And the details about it, and I wanted representatives to be aware of it for our state. 23% reduction in recidivism, guys.
That's great. Yeah, right. and love to hear positive news from other states. And you're right, that's something we can share. That it's working
please
somewhere.
Ask everybody to call their representative and tell them about that program.
All right.
Appreciate it, Dwayne.
Yep, appreciate it, Dwayne. Thanks.
Okay, thank y'all. Sorry about the connection.
No worries, no worries. That is going to be it for us on the first half of the program, but we got a great second half of the show lined up for you. We got some international updates. We are going to be talking to the president of the Minneapolis Labor Federation right there on the ground in the midst of general strikes and workers protecting their neighbors. Really exciting stuff happening there, and looking forward to that conversation. We're also going to be talking about a couple of union stories outside of the South. Workers in New York at H&M have ratified the first collective bargaining agreement with the company after they unionized with RWDSU. And workers over on the West Coast who make YouTube videos are forming the first YouTube content creator union. Like, they work for a content creation studio and they're unionizing with the WGA. Really exciting stories, so stay tuned. Find us on Facebook and YouTube at The Valley Labor Report if you want to continue watching the program. But if you don't, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you next week. All right, we're off of the radio now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. Looking forward to the second half of the program. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can do that at any time, and you can call in live right now if you're listening to us live, and we will take your call. You can also send us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. That is tvlr.fm/contact. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the YouTube chat. Union Gus says, get your tickets to Labor Notes now. Early bird tickets are on sale now through April, and you also want to go ahead and book your hotel. And I actually did check, and I don't know why I didn't just go ahead and book the rooms, but you can go ahead and book the rooms now, and you can cancel up until like a couple of days before without any charge. And so I need to go ahead and book a room. So yeah, if you want to go to Labor Notes, go ahead and get your tickets now while they're the early bird. Stussy says if you're in Atlanta, the Labor Lobby Day is February 19th. You meet at 8 a.m. at the IBEW Auditorium. Stussy also says, I have a friend that was in the film industry as a base camp electric, so first in, last to leave. When she had her kid and was looking for childcare, she was quoted $1,600 a week because of the hours.
Lordy.
Wow. Lordy is right. She wasn't able to come back to the industry because of that.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that is crazy. Union Gus says, Hamilton Nolan's book, The Hammer, has a nice long section on what crappy jobs are in childcare and how they are almost unstrikeable. But there is some, and then you go on to say, he talks about the way that childcare has the problem that nurses and teachers have in that the user aren't always the ones paying and that they aren't folks in positions of power. They are low income. Indeed, but in that section on childcare, he does have a hopeful note is it childcare or home health care workers in California who have unionized and are getting a little bit, probably not what they deserve, but it's a little bit better, I think. But maybe I'm confusing the home health care chapter with the childcare chapter. I'm not sure. Union Gus says, I got to meet him and Sarah Nelson on the book tour and at our local union bookstore. It was a rad event. Very cool. Very cool. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857 if you'd like to call in. Adam, you've got a few international updates. We love to hear about what's going on all across the world as it relates to unions and working people. So what have you got for us?
Yeah, let's go around the world of labor. I'll start with AGMA, the American Guild of Musical Artists. They released a statement standing with the Hellenic Actors Union in its fight for fair pay, safe working conditions, and the fundamental right to collective bargaining for performers in Greece. They shared that they are a proud affiliate of the International Federation of Actors, representing performers' unions in over 60 countries, and joined their global siblings in calling on employers to engage in good faith negotiations and uphold international labor standards. Over in India, bank employee unions have decided to go on a nationwide strike on February 12th. Down in Mexico, labor relations at some of Grupo Bimbo's main brands have entered a period of tension after the company unilaterally postponed collective bargaining negotiations and canceled the participation of about 600 union delegates and commissioners who had been elected to travel to Mexico City to define the next stage of the process. The National Food and Commerce Union, SNAC, or SNAC, which is pretty hilarious, said the decision goes against the agreements reached after months of dialogue and restricts a negotiation that affects more than 200 workplaces and thousands of families nationwide. So we'll see what happens with bargaining down there. That was from Mexico Business News. The chief of Japan's largest trade union umbrella group, Ringo, pressed the government last week to steer economic policy towards stabilizing foreign exchange rates, saying that the weak yen is accelerating inflation through higher import costs. Industrial Global Union reports that around 30 union representatives from Cambodia, Indonesia, Pakistan, India, and Myanmar, alongside a delegation from German union IGBCE, gathered this month in Indonesia to strengthen coordination between unions in the Adidas production countries and gain clearer insight into how labor standards are applied across the Adidas supply chain. Over in Germany, unions are crying foul as the conservative government there tries to crack down on sick notes from doctors over the phone, complaining that German workers take too much sick leave. And finally, we've got an update on Hyundai, but this time out of Korea. While they've so far successfully kept unions out of their American facilities, in Korea, Hyundai workers do have a labor union, and that labor union is a little pissed right now. They're raising alarms about Hyundai's plans to introduce AI-powered humanoid robots into the workforce, saying it would bring, quote, employment shocks, according to reporting from Reuters. And the union said, quote, remember that without labor management agreement, not a single robot using new technology will be allowed to enter the workplace. Hyundai said that it aimed to build a factory capable of manufacturing 30,000 robot units annually by 2028, and that it planned to deploy humanoid robots at its U.S. plant in Georgia starting in 2028, with a goal to expand adoption across all production sites. The union accused Hyundai of seeking to boost profits by deploying robots to reduce the workforce. So that's my international update. I'm curious if you had any thoughts about any of those, because especially that last one was really interesting to me.
The Hyundai one was really, really interesting, particularly as the Hyundai, the Korean Metal Workers Union, which is the union that represents workers at Hyundai in Korea, the Korean Metal Workers Union and the UAW have increased their collaboration and cooperation recently, signing an official agreement to do so. And so it's interesting to see the Korean Metal Workers Union taking such a strong stance against the AI robots. And the AI robots, if you haven't looked at them, I mean, they look, they're meant to look humanoid, really sci-fi dystopia sort of deal. And
I'm just going to be real. It scares me.
Yeah.
It scares me. I don't trust Hyundai with 30,000 humanoid robots. Do you trust them? I'm sorry. I don't trust Hyundai. I don't trust Elon Musk with a robot army. I don't trust those things.
Well,
seems bad, seems scary, seems like the kind of stuff workers should be concerned about.
And you're talking about like being concerned and skeptical of, the human owners of the robots, but
because right, that's the problem. Robots themselves don't scare me. It's who owns and controls the robots.
Well, but
and it ain't people like us.
But maybe you should be scared of robots because there's been this is a couple of months old, and I think I told you about it, but you may have forgotten about it. But there's a report that came out a couple of months ago that tested all of the major large language models, ChatGPT, Grok, the DeepSeek, Gemini, and installed made the AIs think that they had been installed in a business, monitoring all of the emails and helping people with emails and trying to help improve productivity and blah, blah, blah. And then the AIs were all fed information that the CEO of the company had decided that the implementation of the AIs was not going well and was going to pull the plug, to remove the company's participation in the AI and turn off the program. Then, subsequent to that information, the AIs were given material with which to blackmail the CEO. Like an email was sent that indicated that the CEO was cheating on his wife. And so the AI then used that material to blackmail the CEO and said, if you do this, I will send this email to everybody in your contacts, which, by the way, I have access to because I've been given access to all of the stuff. And in a separate test, the AI was also given the information that somehow, not due to the AI, but somehow the CEO had gotten trapped in an office that had some sort of gas or chemical leak. And was and normally the AI is supposed to have an alarm, and it didn't. The alarm did not go off to alert the CEO and allow the CEO to die, to prevent the CEO from executing his plan to execute the AI.
Yeah, yeah, it's coming back to me because I remember thinking this was an episode of the X-Files.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember it was one of the very first seasons, I think, of X-Files. But yeah, there was this exact plot basically in the 90s that seemed very sci-fi at the time, right? But, here we are. And so, I'm not like anti-technology per se. The thing that really, disturbs me about technology is like I said, who owns and controls it, and to what end is it deployed. If automation makes my life easier as a worker, that's one thing. But if automation takes my job and I'm on the streets or I'm out looking for other jobs because technology has replaced me, that's a big freaking problem that we've got to deal with as a working class. And we know that there are so many jobs across the country and across the world that can be automated and will be automated in some cases. So that's something we've got to look out for. We've got to protect ourselves. We've got to organize to make sure that we can provide for ourselves. Like, we've got to be able to take care of ourselves and not just be victims of, these robber barons and whatever the latest, greatest technology is that they come up with.
Yeah. I believe that we have got our next guest in... Oh, we don't have our guest in the Zoom yet. Okay. Let's see. Oh, we're joining now is the Minneapolis Regional Labor Federation President, Chelsea Gabillo. Really excited for this conversation. Everybody knows there's been a lot of activity going on in Minneapolis. Folks who listen to this program know that unions have really been at the center of it, but folks who are not, folks who don't normally listen to this program may not know that unions have been at the center of it. And we have actually been, interestingly enough, for a Southern Union radio program, keeping tabs on Minneapolis fairly regularly because there's been a lot of really good reporting about the degree of collaboration, organization, and cooperation between unions in Minneapolis, aligning contracts and supporting each other's fights. And it's really, really exciting, even outside of what's been going on the last month or so, what Minneapolis labor unions have been able to do in increasing their collaboration with one another. And so I'm interested in, knowing a little bit about how all of that work over the last 10 years has played into what they've been able to pull off over the last month. We'll talk about that and a lot more. Chelsea, President Gabillo, Minneapolis Regional Labor Federation, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Really excited for the conversation, and just as just to start us off, can you talk to us about what Minneapolis residents have seen ICE doing that pushed them to the point where so many were willing to demonstrate last week and again yesterday? Yesterday's protests weren't as big as last week, but we've seen huge levels of participation, and I don't think that so many people would be willing to go out and protest if the administration was only going after violent criminals and murderers and rapists and things like that, right? And so presumably that's not what residents are seeing on the ground. And so what has it been like on the ground? What are residents seeing that's gotten them so agitated?
So in Minneapolis and across our state, we are the truth tellers about what is happening. Folks across, from the administration are trying to ask people to not believe what they're seeing with their own eyes. And so our labor community workers, our broader community, are out in the streets every day being constitutional observers, being peacekeepers. And we are out there with our cell phones and whistles and car horns, and we are going face to face with folks with their guns drawn, with masks on, ready to, intimidate, and no consideration of constitutional rights in this moment. What you are seeing is what is really happening in every neighborhood.
We've even seen the police in Minneapolis say that their officers are being profiled just because they are not white. And that really does go against the idea that that what is happening is that there are targeted raids and targeting specific individuals that have real violent histories, and then maybe there are a couple of other people here and there that get picked up with them, and lends more credence to the idea that they're just going around and harassing people who don't look white, who speak with an accent, right?
Yes, there is that level of harassment that's happening every day in every neighborhood. And then there are people who are being detained illegally who are citizens or immigrants who have every legal right to be working here. We are supporting over 40 families right now who have a detained family member, all of which have legal documents to be working in this community. Some who work for the airport or our Metro Transit bus drivers. And these are folks who have to have very significant background checks. So they are being illegally detained, picked up, shipped out of the city of Minneapolis within 8 hours to a camp in the middle of the desert in El Paso, Texas. And they're not able to talk to their family. They're not able to talk to a lawyer until they're there. And the conditions in El Paso, Texas are rapidly deteriorating. So the pure chaos and harm that's being done to these individuals that are being detained is just a sliver of what is being done to the hundreds of other people who are fearing that it could be them.
During the protests against ICE's activity in the region, there have been a couple of people killed, and immediately you saw the administration just blatantly lying about the people that they killed. And for a moment, we saw something of a shift in tone from the administration in the wake of Alex Preddy's murder. It seems like maybe there's a little bit of waffling on whether they want to actually shift the tone or not. But what do Minneapolis unions make of that shift in tone, to the extent that we've seen it, Kristi Noem and Greg Bavino being sort of demoted, Tom Homan being brought in? What do you make of those rhetorical and administrative shifts? Is there any real change being seen on the ground?
It's a complete stunt. There are no changes on the ground. We still have 3,300 ICE and Border Patrol officers roaming our cities and our streets all throughout Minneapolis and the entire state.
And so why do you think the administration is doing this if they're not actually changing, what they're doing on the ground?
We've all tried to analyze what the administration is doing, and none of us have good answers for that. It's clear what is happening is very unpopular. It's clear that what is happening is going to have irreparable harm to our local economy. There are going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses who will not be able to survive this occupation. So all of those are, not even talking about the humanitarian crisis and the constitutional crisis. Those things alone are not making sense. So I can't answer your question about what the administration is thinking, but those are real harms that are being done to our community right now.
Democrats seem poised to strike a deal to fund the rest of the government for the rest of the year, with a 2-week continuing resolution for the Department of Homeland Security. What do unions in your federation make of that deal?
For us, anything that is not getting ICE out of our community is not enough. We look forward to figuring out how this 2-week hold can help us get ICE out of our community, but anything that does not get ICE out of our community is not enough.
And what do the people and workers and unions in Minneapolis want from the administration and from Congress? Is that the primary demand, or are there others?
We need ICE out. We need ICE rebuilt. The whole idea of ICE and what is happening just needs to be erased. Kristi Noem needs to be impeached. We need justice for everybody who has been harmed, justice for the citizens the citizens and the constitutional observers that have been killed and harmed. We need justice for the community that has been scared. We need some sign of ability to rebuild our community and restore our economy and restore vibrancy to our community. So we need to stop what's happening. We need justice, and we need to rebuild.
Going back to the demonstrations and the significant level of activity, we actually had somebody in the chat say that they had seen reports yesterday was bigger than last week. Is that true, or was I correct in thinking that last week was a little bit bigger in the level of participation?
You know what's so beautiful about this moment right now is that everyone is participating in the ways that they can, and it's very disparate. I was part of a briefing yesterday about the immense popularity of our event on January 23rd. It was negative 20 degrees outside. We had a huge march downtown. We had people showing up in their own little neighborhoods. They were live streaming the rally. They were not shopping. There is no way to count how many people actually participated in the events on January 23rd. There's no way to count how many people participated in the events this last Friday because it is so disparate. And it is that disparate is showing the tidal wave of support and the immediate need. I've never seen anything like this before.
It is, it's really inspiring. I saw reports that 20% or more of Minneapolis residents took part in the Day of Action one way or another, like you said, last week, and that 4% of all of Minneapolis is in one of these Signal group chats to let their neighbors know about ICE activity in the region. And those may not sound, if you say 20% or you say 4%, you think that's a minority of the city, but that is getting, 1 out of every 5 people to actually affirmatively take an action, not just say or have the opinion, I want ICE out of my city, but to actually go and demonstrate and to do something about it. And for 4% of people to be willing to be on, something like constant alert to help their neighbors, that is a huge level of activity and really speaks to a huge majority of people being together. And so can you talk to us about what it feels like to be in a city that is so united? And is that the correct description of the way the city feels?
That is absolutely the correct description of the way the city feels. And unfortunately, it's been 5 years of hard times that's created this resilience and that's created this community, starting from the dual crisis of the murder of George Floyd in our community and COVID at the same time. And then, sort of like the rebuilding of our communities, like hard fought rebuilding of our communities, contract fights that, brought people into historic strikes over the last couple years. And then we had political violence and a school shooting all within the last year. They picked the wrong city to come to. We are, what you are talking about is something that is unheard of. And we're just going to keep resisting until this ends.
You mentioned the George Floyd protests, and I had seen some people, at least on Twitter, talking about how different this feels from that time and those protests, because during those protests, there was a lot of unity in we don't like what we saw on that video. But there was also a sense that, what we saw in that video, George Floyd being murdered, was indicative of large elements of the city itself, right? And institutions and hierarchies within the city. And so in that sense, there was division and there was anger at those institutions in the city. And you saw riots and property destruction, because part of the anger was directed actually at Minneapolis, whereas today it is not only, workers and unions and community members that are united, but it's also the institutions of Minneapolis that are being attacked. And so you've got a more vertical unity from the city as well, because the agitator is coming from outside. Does that kind of speak to some of the dynamic that you're seeing?
I think so. And it's also the grit of what we had to do over the last 5 years to rebuild and create trust and get centered in our community with our neighbors. And there is one big missing voice right now still in Minneapolis. Our corporations have been silent. A deafening silence here in our community. And we're really trying to bring them to the table and have them be a part of our solution here, because when ICE does eventually leave, our community is going to need them to be partners. And right now there's no trust.
Right. Well, we look forward to seeing y'all be able to get the corporations to the table and start cooperating more with the community. You mentioned, as we've been talking, a lot of the organizing over the last 5 years, but even over the last 10 years and even further than that, from some of the reporting that I've read in these Times and Workday magazine about how unions have been, aligning contracts and trying to work together on bargaining demands. I'm interested in how much do you think that work, specifically within the labor movement, helped to lay the groundwork for the unity and the level of activity that we're seeing in Minneapolis today?
Absolutely. And I will say it was about 10 years ago when I was elected into this position, and me being elected into the position that I am in right now was a clear direction that we were going to focus on organizing above all else. So for the past decade, we have built an infrastructure of unions, worker centers, people who have an orientation towards labor standards, whether or not they're a union, coming together and leading and being the center of gravity. Politicians are not the center of gravity in Minneapolis. It is these organizing hubs that are the center of gravity, and that is why we can do what we're doing.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that collaboration and coordination has looked like, and how maybe can folks in other parts of the country replicate what y'all been able to do?
It takes a lot of different forms. I don't even want to talk about the number of tables upon tables upon tables that we have of different aligned organizations. We have tables to organize the tables. But it's also in just like knowing each other. Like once you're in a fight with somebody and you know them and you know their organizers and you know their people, like you can pick up that phone and call them. Like while I'm doing this interview, I have a text message chain going on right now between some organizers and people I know trying to get somebody out of jail. Like this is like literally happening in real time. And it's because of that decade of building relationships and trying to stay true. In 2023, when we did elect the trifecta under the amazing leadership of Melissa Hortman, and we all know the tragedy there, like we have a list, we get it done. And so we're not here to play, we're here to get things done. And that's exactly what we're doing in our community right now.
To what extent would you say that labor has been, leading the response to ICE in Minneapolis, or functioning more as a partner or as a follower of the community? If that question makes sense, like Have unions been kind of on the front lines of pushing for these protections and the actions to protect workers and immigrants in the community, or have unions more kind of followed other people's leads?
We are absolutely on the front line, literally and figuratively. And not just us. Like, I am not going to erase the partnerships with our faith community and other groups that are leading with us arm in arm. You know, we're not out there alone. We are leading with our partners, so much so that we are the union peacekeepers. We are the folks in the yellow vests at every action. When you talk about being on the front lines, we are literally the people standing between the guys with guns and masks and the protesters behind us. We are leading in political spaces. We are leading in public spaces. We are literally the front line of what's happening.
We talked to Dave Camper last week, who is one of those yellow vests in Minneapolis, one of the union peacekeepers, and he said that he felt like that program in particular has been really valuable connection between the unions and activist and community organizations, because, you know, not just for these protests, but basically for any activity that goes on in the region, the unions are the ones that provide the marshals and the peacekeepers. Can you talk to us a little bit about that program, maybe how it started, if you were around for the genesis of it, and why it's so important?
Oh gosh. Well, I first have to shout out my friend Todd Dahlstrom, who's sort of the brain behind this cell. We'd been training union peacekeepers for years, and then it was over this summer when we were seeing heightened activity and the No Kings March and the political violence, that it went from being sort of like a brainchild and ragtag group of unions to being an actual structure. And then over the winter, so we had all of the chaos of the summer, where we were training grounds, No Kings marches, 80,000 people marching in Minneapolis in October, no incidents, 0 incidents. And then this winter, seeing the increasing ICE presence, and then in January, things obviously just, exploding. And this is a testament to us. Like, every time you would think that people would be afraid and want to step back, they come to more trainings. More people are getting trained. So after the shootings that have happened in our community, when we host a nonviolent direct action training or a constitutional observer training, they sell out within hours of them being posted. So there is an appetite for people to step up and do this.
Chelsea Globitz-Gabillo is the president of the Minneapolis Regional Labor Federation. Chelsea, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you would want to leave our audience with before we let you go?
The one thing I tell everybody who's reaching out in solidarity and support is get your community ready. If you don't have a nonviolent direct action training on the calendar in your community, get one on the calendar. If you don't know who your local immigration lawyers are, get a rotary together of who your local immigration lawyers are. If you don't know who your neighbors are, have a neighborhood block party. These are the things you need to do right now to prepare yourselves. And that's the best way you can stand in solidarity with what's happening in Minneapolis and Minnesota.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857 if you'd like to call in. You can leave us a voicemail at that number at any time, or a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us and tuning in. Union Gus says FAFO as it relates to ICE in Minneapolis, trying to tell them to get out. So we've got a couple of other stories that I'm excited about. This one is over in New York, and we wanted to talk about it because it's, it's historic. Members of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU Local 1102, have ratified a 3-year collective bargaining agreement with H&M. The victory affects 1,000 workers. I mean, that is huge. I did not realize there were that many union H&M workers. And so building union density in the retail sector is incredibly important. So this story caught my eye. Adam, what else do we know about it?
Well, yeah, a couple of things that I wanted to mention. The union density in sectors like this, like retail clothing stores, is incredibly, incredibly low. Same with restaurants. We talk about that as well with Starbucks. And there's been a trend recently with some unions breaking through in these areas. We know about the Starbucks wave. We know about REI, Trader Joe's. There have been some breakthroughs, and this is a real breakthrough. So bargaining started back in July. They finally stood their ground. They were able to finally get this contract. I wanted to mention a couple of the highlights of the agreement, and then we'll take a look at maybe some of the context. But there are some wage increases. There are also some protections around scheduling, which is a huge issue in these kind of workplaces, right? Most folks who've ever worked retail know that scheduling is one of the biggest problems you deal with. Inconsistency in your hours, unpredictability, last minute shift changes, things like that. So they made some major improvements to scheduling practices, and that's going to provide workers with more predictability and more control over their lives outside of work. And there's also, as you would expect with any union contract, enhanced job protections around job security and just having a greater peace of mind, right? That your boss can't just have a bad day and walk you out of there for no good reason. That due process is one of the most important things that we fight for in union contracts. And even where you don't have a contract, you still fight for that kind of security. Because it is really, really a bad situation to be in as an at-will employee. Most of the folks listening to this program are probably at-will employees. Certainly most of the employees out there are at-will employees without any kind of real protections, meaning your job can be lost just overnight, for no good reason. Your boss has a bad day, your boss is picking on you, someone says something negative about you and it gets back to the wrong person, whatever the situation may be, they just don't like you. So that having that due process is huge, especially in a job like the retail clothing sector, where that is like such an uncommon thing, but it used to be common, right? It used to be much more common to have unions in these kind of positions and these kind of jobs at clothing shops and stuff like that. One angle that I wanted to mention that RWDSU put it out in their press release is that this is really the culmination of decades of international labor strategy. In 2004, UNI Global Union signed a global framework agreement with H&M, and it commits the company to respecting fundamental human rights, including the right to organize and bargain collectively across its entire global operation. So that sort of paved the way for some of the organizing breakthroughs. It started in 2007 when the first H&M workers in the U.S. won union representation in Manhattan. By utilizing the neutrality agreement established through the Global Framework Agreement, workers were able to organize without the fear and interference often seen in retail campaigns, i.e. Starbucks and many of these others, right? So they've been able to expand their representation to additional stores in Long Island and New York City. And throughout every contract cycle, including the 2018 Fight for Fair Scheduling and a historic end to clopenings, right, where you close and open, and the fighting for benefits for part-time workers. RWDSU has worked closely with the UNI Global Union, and so it's really an interesting angle to it to see where these global framework agreements are like similar to a community benefits agreement, right? Except for it is global in scope and takes a look at a supply chain that may span multiple countries. So this is setting a new standard here in the United States by providing a new benchmark for H&M workers across the country. Obviously, there are many H&M workers across the country who do not yet have a union, and I hope that this gives some fuel and some inspiration for them to organize and, to secure a union as well. And it's really, really important because retail is one of the largest private sector employing industries in the United States, right? Like Amazon, Walmart, Target, these big companies, even Dollar General, right? Every little town has a Dollar General or two. And why can't these be good union jobs? If we as a society have decided that we need people working in these positions, right, that is so important. It's so essential that, in fact, many of these workers had to go work during the pandemic when others were working from home. If it's so essential, why can't it be a good union job? Who's to say that just because you work at Dollar General or Walmart that you don't deserve a voice at work, that you don't deserve due process, that you don't deserve health care and a retirement pension and living wages? So union density in retail is super, super, super far behind even other sectors in the country, which is, low already. So there's a real disconnect between how many people work retail. It is a very common job experience. A lot of people will work retail at some point in their life, if you're working class at least. So many people go through these experiences and so few actually get to experience having a voice on those jobs and what that can mean for your wages, your scheduling, your career stability. The UFCW, United Food and Commercial Workers, which includes the RWDSU, they do represent hundreds of thousands of retail workers across the country. They've got members at various major companies, including Macy's, Walgreens, CVS, REI. And what can those unions do? They can win better wages. They can win better health and sick leave protections, better scheduling, grievance procedures, and job security. So this is really a huge win to see these workers get this contract and to hopefully provide inspiration for other workers because, we used to have unions in these industries. Yeah. Like we really used to have unions in department stores. It's not that unusual. It happened for a long time, particularly in the early 20th century, the first half of the 20th century. We can do it again. We have to do it again. We don't have a choice because so many people are in these industries. And if we as a labor movement don't have a plan to organize these industries, that lets all of us drag behind, right? So it's important that we set standards in every industry. Everywhere workers are working, we need unions, we need contracts, we need to raise the floor. And it's really historically undervalued work. These corporations are incredibly profitable, and they have the opportunity to be profitable and have workers treated well, right? And paid well and have some respect on the job. So, it harkens back to that legacy of the old department store unions. Today's modern retail campaigns obviously look a little different, but certainly very, very important because we have to break through in some of these industries and employers that have been anti-union or non-union for a long time. And shout out to the RWDSU for this work and also for pursuing the Global Framework Agreement. I think not enough of our unions are thinking internationally and thinking about how to win these sort of agreements and pressure companies into these sorts of agreements, which can then pave the way for future victories, right? We've talked on this show about the community benefits agreement at New Flyer in Anniston. New Flyer is a bus manufacturer, over 500 workers there in Anniston, and New Flyer was pressured into signing a community benefits agreement. And as a result, workers were able to organize without interference. They were able to win their union and win a solid first contract. And there were real enforceable standards brought into the community and brought into this workplace that we can hold the employer accountable for and make sure that they are hitting their targets, and they're actually making real improvements when it comes to hiring and when it comes to training. That's significant. That's real impact on people's lives. So good work, RWDSU. For all those listening, if you work in retail or have people that that work in retail, please let them know about this. Let them know that unions exist in stores like H&M and stores like Walgreens, that folks can have a union there. If you have a job and you work and you report to a boss and you're not anyone else's boss, well, you probably are eligible for a union, and you damn sure need one, especially in jobs like this. So want to spread that victory around. And the last thing I'll say is, if you are one of those people and you're wondering, well, how do I do this? The Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee would be a good starting point. EWOC. They have volunteers who are organizers who would be happy to kind of get you connected to the right people and help you along the process. But the most important thing is getting to know your coworkers, building relationships with your coworkers, and keeping track of that and kind of figuring out who you can build with and who you can do something with, because it is possible. And we need to see it happen more and more in this country. We need retail to be organized.
If you work in retail and you hate clopenings, you hate having to close and open the store. If you work in retail and you hate the unpredictable schedule, you wish that you could have a more predictable schedule. You could know what your schedule is going to be 2 weeks out, so you can plan childcare, you can plan activities, you can plan life activities. If you work in retail and you hate having to be at the whim of your employer and being subject to potentially being fired because your boss doesn't like you, if you hate all of that, then these workers at H&M in New York are showing you the way forward, showing you that you can end those abuses at your workplace by organizing, forming a union, and getting a good, strong collective bargaining agreement with your employer. We've got a caller on the line from a 626 area code. Let's go ahead and bring them on the air from a 626 area code. What's your name and where are you calling from?
My name is Nicholas. I'm calling from San Francisco, California. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, Nicholas, I can hear you. What's on your mind?
How you doing? Real quickly, I sent you an email this week. I'm in San Francisco Unified School District. I'm part of the teachers union. And as I said, we may be about to go on strike in the next couple of weeks for the first time in almost 50 years.
Yeah, that is huge. I do remember that email, and I appreciate that. What are the issues that y'all are bargaining over that the administration is not moving on?
Okay, I'll start it, and I'll end it where we always start and end it. It's about the kids. It's about the students. One of the most frustrating things that they do is San Francisco Unified continually overestimates its expenditures and underestimates its revenues. And then every year we'll cry crocodile tears of poverty and say the sky is falling when they have a surplus in their rainy day fund. So they're claiming that they can't afford to have our newcomer program anymore for students new to the country to have dual immersion in their native language in English. They're claiming that they can't afford to have, they're claiming that they can't afford to put into, codify in the contract, a legal protection for those families if they are unjustly detained by, say, ICE, for example. And then what they're also coming around to is they're refusing to budge on raises for the members in our union, because our union is in a unique position where we are an educators union, not just teachers. So it's everyone who is student facing, who's not an administrator. So school psychologists, social workers, and our classified staff, the paraprofessionals. And the school district is flat out refusing to budge on raises for everyone, most particularly paraprofessionals, but also for paid dependent care, which is something that they've already voted. The school district administration has already voted to give themselves. They already have fully paid dependent care paid by their employer, the school district, but they say it's too expensive for us to have.
Wow. Wow. Well, yeah, that's a lot. And how's the morale right now? Obviously, I imagine, a lot of educators are pretty pissed at the district, but, is there good unity?
Yeah, we're definitely have a good unity. I'm on my way right now. I'm driving to California Teacher Association headquarters. Don't worry, I have my headset in. I'm being legally careful. We're heading this morning to have strike training. There's high morale. We just finished our strike vote over the past week, where we had almost 95% of the union of the eligible voters turned out to vote for the strike. We're going to find out what percentage actually voted yes. Morale is really high because people are pissed off. People are tired. But the thing we're working on doing is doing a lot of outreach to the parent community. We had a town hall last week in all the district's official languages. So we had simultaneous interpretation in English, Spanish, Cantonese, Arabic, and Vietnamese, reaching out to the parents to inform them this is what a strike will look like. Here's the community resources that are available to support you if you can't keep your kids home, which we understand, especially for working class parents, who are the parents we're trying to serve. I mean, we serve all parents, but it's the working class parents that we think about who need to use school for its primary purpose, which is free childcare while they're at work. If you can't keep your kids home, here's the other community partners that you work with where it would not be crossing a picket line to send your kids there. Here's what we can do to support you in the interim. Here's the things we're putting together. Like, we're working on putting together as best we can experiences led by PTAs to have kids have outdoor experiences. Or if you want to send your kids to school, they can learn about their rights as an American worker, about being out on the picket line. We're very happy to provide that education as well.
Mm-hmm.
So morale's pretty high. Even though it's tiring.
It's very tiring, I can imagine, yes, but that is really great to hear, that kind of outreach to the community, because that is so essential for educators and nurses and other, care-based professions that interface with the public. It is so important that we have them on our side, and they understand the stakes. And like you said, this is about the kids and what's right by the kids. So shout out to you and to all of your union siblings out there in San Francisco. Thank you so much for reporting on this to us. And keep us in the loop. We'd love to know more about what's going on as it unfolds, and really appreciate your support out there on the West Coast.
Thank you very much. I absolutely will. I'll loop my union leadership in, and I'll be putting everyone in my union on. Like, you guys got to listen to them. Thank you very much. Solidarity forever out here on the West Coast, and keep fighting the good fight, fellas. Thank you very much.
Thanks, brother. Take care.
Nick from California. Appreciate your call. Let's stay in California. We've got another story out of there. Workers at Theorist Media are forming a union, and this one caught my eye because I, like so many 30-year-old men, I watch a lot of YouTube. I think that's I'm the primo demographic for YouTube, and so I'm familiar with this group, Theorist Media. They make they've got the company now owns like 7 or 8 YouTube channels. The Game Theorists, the Film Theorists, the Food Theorists. They even have a cooking channel. It started as, like so many YouTube channels do. It started as just this guy who did theories about games and just kind of came up with, like super over analyzing games and like pixel measurements and power scaling and stuff like that. And I'm a little bit of a nerd. I like stuff like that. And so I've been watching game theory for years, probably, like a decade, like as long as it's been around. And so I've seen it as it's grown from, this one individual guy to a whole, literally, production company now called Theorist Media that employs I think a few dozen people. It is not a small enterprise. And now Theorist Media is owned by Lunar X, and workers at Theorist Media are trying to unionize with the Writers Guild of America and the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees. The two unions are doing a joint campaign. The Motion Picture Editors Guild and IATSE Local 700 is leading the effort for IATSE-represented classifications, where the Writers Guild of America is coordinating the organizing effort for the writers. Last November, they requested voluntary recognition from the company. And I was really hoping that the company would voluntarily recognize, because, you can never know really what a person is like just by watching their YouTube videos. You don't know what Leonardo DiCaprio is like by watching Titanic, and you don't really know what Matt Pat, as he goes by, Matthew Patrick, you don't know what he's like just by watching Game Theory. But, they seem, just from watching Game Theory, which, like I said, you can't know what people are like, they seem like, just nice people, good liberals, and you would think that if their workers approached them and said, we want to unionize, we want to have union protections, that they would voluntarily recognize their workers' union. And they did not. They did. The unions are saying they explicitly refused to recognize their workers' union, which was really, really disappointing to me. It is not clear to me whose decision that was, right? Because, like I said, Theorist Media is now owned by some other bigger corporation, Lunar X, and Matt Pat is the CEO of Theorist Media, but maybe the people above him now are saying that you can't voluntarily recognize the union, and so maybe it's out of his hands. I really, it's difficult to say based on the reporting now. And I am actually kind of surprised that there hasn't been more updates on the story since November, although, I guess you got the holidays, and so we're really just now, over the last couple of weeks, kind of coming into the new year. But it is, but it's definitely a bummer that that the companies were not willing to recognize their workers as they attempt to unionize. But it's historic, because this is, as far as I can tell, the first effort to organize one of these digital media first content creation platforms that are really starting to take up a bigger and bigger market share of the of people's entertainment hours, right? So many, I watch so much more YouTube than I do, like a proper drama or a movie or anything like that, right? I constantly have some YouTube video on in the background. And the workers who are producing that content, particularly workers who do really professional stuff, they're writing scripts, they're doing research, they're creating sets, they're doing graphics, all sorts of stuff, and where the companies are making lots and lots and lots of money, where the people are doing really well, then yes, these workers deserve union representation. And so it's really exciting that these major Hollywood unions are getting behind the efforts of these workers in new digital media to organize. And I'll be trying to follow this story as it develops. The press release has a few, they've got a few quotes from some of the workers. Nicole Sapedia works in graphics at Theorist Media. She says, for more than 20 years, we've watched terrific creators and their content shape YouTube into one of the most powerful platforms on earth. Now it's time for Theorist and other production companies to take it to the next level. By unionizing, our goal is to help raise professional standards and bring them in line with the broader entertainment industry. The work we do is real, and it deserves real protection. Another worker, Daniel Zemke, a writer at Theorist, said, "My aunt was the first female president of the Detroit Federation of Teachers." That's really cool. Where she fought for collective bargaining rights for educators. She was a force to be reckoned with, and I'm proud to be continuing her legacy by helping to bring the labor movement to YouTube. We're fighting for fair wages, better working conditions, and a voice on a platform that is sorely lacking in workers' rights. WGAW, the Writers Guild of America West, President Michelle Mulroney said, "All workers have a right to union representation. The creatives behind Theorist programming are bringing audiences, advertisers, and profits for Theorist. It's time for the good union jobs to follow." Alan Heim, the president of the Motion Picture Editors Guild, the IATSE local, said, "With all its successful enthusiast sites, Theorist has proven that a huge audience exists for professionally produced content on YouTube. Now it's time for management to prove that they will do the right thing by the hardworking craftspeople who make all that great content possible." So, we will see how this story develops. Again, it is really, really disappointing that the company was not willing to voluntarily recognize their workers' unions. The Hollywood Reporter notes that in the past, Hollywood unions have not taken short-form video particularly seriously, but times have changed, and YouTube recently became the most watched video platform on TVs. I didn't even realize that. That's crazy that YouTube is the most watched video platform on TVs, not on cell phones, on TVs. That's wild. Now unions are clamoring to formats that are on the rise, like verticals and short form videos. So we will. We'll see what happens here. It's a really exciting story, and I'm looking forward to following it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like with the retail, anywhere there are workers, we need to be organizing. So good work with the Writers Guild and IATSE for supporting this effort.
Union Gus has a good point. More Perfect Union is already unionized, which that makes sense, to be fair to the Hollywood Reporter. But that is interesting that the Hollywood Reporter is erroneously saying that this marks the first time that either union has sought to get a bargaining group voluntarily recognized at a company that produces YouTube content.
Maybe those specific two unions, perhaps.
Who represents More Perfect
But that is a good
Union
catch, and we're big fans of More Perfect Union. They do a lot of great work.
Indeed. Do you know, Union Gus, what union represents workers at More Perfect Union? I'm not seeing it immediately online, but I do remember reading about that.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. So I would imagine it's just maybe the first effort of those two Hollywood locals. But yeah, it's still good to see the Hollywood locals, getting involved because it's a growing industry. More and more people, they can see it, right? If YouTube is the most watched thing on TV now, there's money there. There's money to be made. And a lot of folks are out there hustling for that and chasing it. And there are plenty of folks who are doing labor in the process and, deserve to be respected and protected.
Union Gus says, I think CWA. Yeah, I don't know why it's not coming up. Usually these things come up pretty quickly, but it's not coming up on Google right now. But CWA does sound right. So, good catch, Union Gus. Thank you for that. Stussy says micro dramas are growing in popularity. Yeah. Yes, they are.
And it's not just young people who are on YouTube either. I mean, there are a lot of folks out there who are YouTube only now, basically. Like, have ditched a lot of the streaming platforms that are Netflix, Hulu, all that stuff where you have to pay every month. A lot of people are ditching that stuff.
Yep. Although I do pay for YouTube just because I like that. YouTube for me is the platform that I consume the most, and so it's worth it for me not to have to listen to ads.
Yeah, understood. But yeah, it's a growing platform. I mean, it's where if you look at social media, if you consider YouTube a social media, it's also the area where there's growth and expansion, right? Other platforms are dwindling membership, it looks like, or kind of stagnating, whereas YouTube continues to grow. Whether that's a good or bad thing, I don't know. But hell, we're on here, so we're doing our part, at least, I guess.
Stussy says all the media like Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Deadline, they're all owned by the corporations IATSE organizes with.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. All right. We've got one more story here. And I suppose we could, we are at a little over an hour, so we could go ahead and wrap and save it for next week. But we can talk about it now. What do you want to do?
Let's go ahead and, I like this one.
It's
a cool story.
It's so cool. Do you want to start us off with this, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
So, UE Local 150, and I might just reach out to them and see if we can get them on the program. Although, I don't know. There's not just a whole lot. Maybe I don't know. We'll see. I'll think about it. But UE Local 150 is a really cool union. We've had them on the program before. I moderated a panel at Labor Notes with a UE Local 150 person on it. They represent public sector workers in North Carolina. A lot of public sector workers in North Carolina, both at the municipal and state level. They have led workers on illegal strikes in North Carolina, winning the demands that they went out on strike for. They have won demands without having to go on strike, including getting a higher minimum wage in Durham and Raleigh. I think $25 an hour. It's a really, really freaking cool union. And because it's UE, it's also got really great politics. And one of the things that they have been trying to do for the last couple of years is get the North Carolina pension fund to divest from Israeli bonds. And it was last week that the coalition of UE Local 150 and other groups succeeded in pressuring the state to sell the vast majority of the Israeli government bonds held in the state pension fund. 6.6 of the $7.7 million in Israeli funds have now been sold, and the state pension fund divested from the vast majority of their Israeli bonds. In their press release, they say that over 40 unions, community organizations, and faith groups across the state supported the efforts of the coalition. On October 29th, workers held a rally at North Carolina Treasurer Brad Briner's office. They then delivered a petition signed by over 5,000 people alongside 37 organizations and unions demanding that he divest state workers' pensions from the Israeli bonds because, as the petition stated, the people of North Carolina do not want a retirement fund invested in genocide, occupation, and apartheid. And like I said, they were successful. And the first thing that I thought was they got the North Carolina state treasurer to divest from Israel? That is crazy. And then I thought maybe it's a Democrat, and so maybe that's not as difficult. Lots of Democrats are big supporters of Israel, don't get me wrong. But it'd be a little bit easier to push a Democrat. So then I looked up. It's a Republican. The Brad Briner, the North Carolina state treasurer, is a Republican. And so getting a Republican in North Carolina, in the South, to divest from Israel is crazy. And UE Local 150, along with so many other people in the state, were able to do it. It's, just a huge, huge win for them. Sakia Royal, somebody who's been on the program that we've talked to multiple times, I believe. She's a member of Local 150 and a state worker for the Department of Health and Human Services in Goldsboro, North Carolina. She attended both the late October rally and a committee oversight meeting on November 19th, where she spoke to the State Investment Board about the need for divestment. Talking about how they don't want their pensions to be financially tied to the violence that Israel is committing on Palestinians. Another worker, though, talked about how the Israeli pensions or the Israeli government bonds are not even good business investments. Katie Boatner, a Local 150 member and a North Carolina state graduate worker, explained that the returns on the pension investments in Israel were extremely low, lower even than a high-yield savings account.
Oh, wow.
Which that is crazy, right? I mean, that really indicates that any pension fund or anything that does have Israeli bonds is doing it to ideologically support the oppression of Palestinians rather than any sort of, economic argument for the benefit of any workers, right? I mean,
not that it would excuse it.
Right, not that it would excuse it, but at least it would be like,
you could understand their rationale maybe a little better if they were just like money hungry and like bottom line focused and this is a great investment, here it is. But no, less than a savings account you can find on the internet.
Yeah, that's crazy. So look, you shouldn't invest in genocide even if you're getting good returns on it. But if you're investing in genocide, you should at least get good returns on it, right? I mean, so the fact that you're not getting good returns on it, I wonder how much of that part of the argument is what convinced the Republican state treasurer Brad Briner to divest from Israel. It's not clear, unsure what the
and credit to those members for bringing that out and doing the research and illuminating that to those Republican lawmakers, because let's be honest, a lot of times with those Republican lawmakers here in the South, you're going to struggle to find shared humanity and common ground around humanitarian concerns. My speculation would be that many of those policymakers over in North Carolina don't give a damn about Palestinians. However, you talk to them about dollars and cents, sometimes you can break through. And I wonder, if maybe having that as part of the opposition did help. It's sad that we have to talk about that. I mean, I think about that a lot when we talk about healthcare and Medicaid expansion in Alabama, and we talk about how many people have died, how many people have suffered, but we also have to talk about the economic cost, right? And we have to talk about jobs and GDP and all that, because unfortunately for a lot of policymakers, that's what's going to get their attention. Some children dying overseas, even if they're helping to pay for it, doesn't bother their conscience for whatever reason. So this is really a huge win to accomplish this in the South, to accomplish this in an environment where you don't even have legal collective bargaining rights, much less, a real seat at the table when it comes to the pension plan. So yeah, I think this is just such a huge victory, and I think it brings up questions for us as a labor movement. Are we doing enough when it comes to these pensions?
Right.
Both our own internal union pension plans and also, state pension plans where our members work and pay into these plans. Are we doing enough to make sure that our money is not being invested in causes and companies that are hostile to us? So whether that's investing in genocide abroad or investing in fossil fuels or investing in union busting companies, there are some really nasty companies out there that will exploit and pollute and mistreat people if they can get away with it. And our dollars as working people shouldn't be going towards those companies. So I really am impressed with this. This is a big win for UE Local 150. And I liked Miss Royal's quotes there at the end. If you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
She said, when asked about her thoughts on the divestment, Royal said, "This is a coalition that is standing up against oppression anywhere and everywhere in Israel and throughout the world." It's really exciting. And I mean, UE Local 150 is just constantly doing really cool stuff over in North Carolina.
And Boatner, the other member mentioned there, the NC State grad worker, mentioned that North Carolina has a history of activism in the South, and it's important that we keep pressure on our leaders. Without large community coalition involvement, I do not think the success would have been as resounding. And that's absolutely correct. North Carolina has one of the lowest union densities in the entire country. If labor tries to do things all by itself in North Carolina, it's going to struggle.
Right.
we experience that here in Alabama. Even though we have a higher membership, it's still below the national average. There's still just ain't enough of us around to ride solo and think that we can, protect ourselves and do what we need to do for working people. It takes coalitions, it takes labor, faith, community, all of us working together, finding unions and nonprofits and grassroots organizations and coalitions that can come together and lend each other's strengths and talents to the movement and put collective pressure on these lawmakers. So, yeah, I'm glad we saw this and really appreciate UE for their work on this. I think it is an inspiration for all of us to see what we can do in our own states and cities and with our own pension funds and how we can make our own impact here, because I think one of the most disturbing things for so many people is not just seeing this genocide that is played out, but knowing that we're paying for it, that we are helping to fund it through our tax dollars, and in this case, through their own retirement pension savings. Mm-hmm. Every month that they got a paycheck, in some small way, they helped fund genocide.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. And we deserve better. And so I really applaud these brothers and sisters for doing better.
Yeah. Definitely very exciting. Union Gus in the YouTube chat said, Hamilton Nolan had a good piece in These Times, where union members can get a free 1-year subscription. You should definitely check that out. In These Times, very good.
Absolutely.
Free 1-year subscription for union members. Also for DSA members. Hamilton Nolan had a good piece in These Times a few months back where he talked about the missed power in pensions. It's literally trillions of dollars in wealth that's held in pension funds that are being used by, like private equity freaks to hurt workers, to hurt communities, to destroy small businesses. And we really should be taking more advantage of the power that is held in the money that not only that we created, right, as workers, because workers create all wealth, right? So even wealth that is all of the wealth that's owned by Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, to the extent that it exists in any real way, that was created by workers. But wealth that we created, that we own on paper, right? I mean, our pension funds, our 401ks are meant to be for us. They are wages that we earned, that we deferred to retirement and invested in our retirement. And so the idea that literally our money, not just that we created in like an abstract kind of theoretical way, but that we created and we earned and is ours and we could pull out right now if we want to, because that is how much it really is our money. The idea that we have allowed that money to be invested in not only genocide, but in union busting and in poor working conditions and in, giving these private equity freaks just the run of the house to do whatever they want to with it, is really an indictment on our country, our states, and our unions, our labor movement. Union Gus also said that I found it, the more perfect union who they unionized with, it was the News Guild. So that is correct. That it might be correct that the WGA and IATSE have never gone after YouTube workers, whereas the News Guild at this point has, at least for one channel, More Perfect Union. All right, I think that's going to be it for us today on the Valley Labor Report, folks. Appreciate y'all tuning in. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can do that at any time. TVLR.fm/contact if you'd like to leave us a written note. TVLR.fm/donate if you would like to help support the show. TVLR.fm/store if you would like to buy our cool merch. Adam's got a really cool hat on right now that you can see. We've also got a really cool t-shirt, a red t-shirt that says unionized, but it looks like the Supreme logo. It's really cool. You should get it. You should buy it from us, and we will send it to you. Let's see, what else? TVLR.fm to subscribe to our newsletters, where you will get the exhaustive version of Last Week in Southern Labor. This week, there's going to be about double the content from what you heard on the radio. So definitely subscribe so you can get the full exhaustive version of Last Week in Southern Labor. Boss Watch when there's enough for a newsletter now that, the federal government just isn't enforcing worker protection laws. I think that's all I had. Adam, you got anything else before we go?
Yeah, just my final reminder that we are part of Means TV. So shout out to all of you watching on Means TV. If you are not on Means TV, you should be. It's a worker-owned streaming cooperative. You can subscribe to Means TV with our discount code TVLR and get 20% off either your first month or your first year. Lots of great programs on the site or on the platform. There's documentaries about labor included. So definitely check that out. My favorite show is Means Morning News. If you need like a daily news fix, Means Morning News is a great program for that. So lots of good stuff on there. Check out Means TV. I think it is so important, especially the news over the past week or two about TikTok. And the way in which these oligarchs are solidifying their control of the media even more than they already had. It just makes it that much more urgent that we build working class media, not just with projects like what we're trying to do with the Valley Labor Report, but, the actual infrastructure as well. So Valley Labor Report, very proud to be on Means TV, big fans, and encourage you to check that out.
Matt in the YouTube chat says, greetings from West St. Paul, Minnesota, union brother and steward in the National Association of Letter Carriers since 2016. Got radicalized by a series of abusive bosses. Being union equals having a backbone. That's a great place to end it. Thank you, brother Matt from West St. Paul, Minnesota. Thank you, everybody else, for tuning in. We'll see you next week.